Okay, we're going to deconstruct one of the most famous leadership handoffs in history, Joshua's first command. And what we're going to find is that it completely flips our modern idea of success on its head. So I want you to picture this. You've got an entire nation, and for 40 long years, they've been wandering in the desert. Now they're standing on the banks of the Jordan River, and right across that water is the land they've been promised for generations. I mean, their destiny is right there.
But there's a huge problem, a massive one. The only leader they have ever known, the legendary Moses, he's gone. He's dead. And suddenly there's this enormous leadership vacuum right when the stakes are at their absolute highest.
So that brings us to the big question, right? In this critical make-or-break moment, how does God prepare the new guy, Joshua, for what seems like a totally impossible mission? You might think you know the answer, but it's probably not what you're expecting.
All right, so first up, the land. God's first instruction is all about the land. But was it something they were working towards, or was it already theirs?
So God kicks things off with what sounds like a rock-solid guarantee. He tells Joshua, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you. I mean, that sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? It's like a blank check for conquest.
But, and this is where it gets really interesting, there's this incredible tension in the original Hebrew that most of us just read right over. A scholar named Dr. David Howard points this out. See, one verse uses a verb that sounds like it's happening right now. I am giving you the land. But then the very next verse uses a verb that sounds like it's already done. I have given you the land. So which is it? Well, the text holds both ideas at the same time. From God's point of view, it's a done deal. But from their perspective, they still have to go in and take it.
Okay, so let's move on to the next part of this charge, because this is the part that everybody knows. It's the famous command to be courageous.
And look, God doesn't just mention it in passing. Nope. In this one short speech, he tells Joshua to be strong and courageous, not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. You can almost feel the tension ratcheting up. You're thinking, okay, something big is about to happen. So you hear all this talk about being courageous, they're about to go into a new land. What's the next logical thing you'd expect to hear? You're waiting for the brilliant military strategy, right? The battle plan.
Yeah, he doesn't give him one at all. 0 tactical advice, no battle plans, no flanking maneuvers, nothing. Just silence on the military front.
And this is the moment everything pivots. This is the key to the whole passage. The courage that God is demanding from Joshua, it's not for the battlefield. It's courage that is centered 100% on His law.
This is where the real focus is. God tells him, "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night." Why? For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. You see the connection? It's not military genius that leads to success. It's meditating on the law. So God's actual strategy had nothing to do with swords and shields. It was all about spiritual discipline. Step 1, be careful to follow the law, all of it. Step 2, don't stray from it, not to the right, not to the left. And step 3, think about it, meditate on it, all day, all night. And this is the bottom line, really. The real battlefield that Joshua is being prepped for wasn't against some foreign army. The real battle was going to be an internal one, a fight for his own personal, unwavering obedience to God's commands. Okay, so this is where it gets really relevant for us today, because those 2 words, prosperous and success, boy, have they been used in some interesting ways. So let's really dig in and figure out what they meant back then. Now, you've probably heard of the prosperity gospel. It's the idea that God shows His favor through material things like health and wealth. And Joshua 1:8 is often pulled out as a key verse to support this. The idea that if you just follow God's rules, you're going to get rich. But hang on. Based on the context we just walked through, where courage is about the law, not battle, we have to stop and ask, is that really what these words mean here? Is it about getting a bigger bank account? Well, let's see what the rest of the Bible has to say. If we jump over to the book of Proverbs, we get a totally different vibe. It actually warns people, hey, don't wear yourself out trying to get rich. Why? Because riches will sprout wings and fly off, like an eagle. So it's saying wealth is super fleeting and maybe not the best thing to chase after. And there's another proverb that offers this incredible prayer. The person asks God, "Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread." The goal isn't to get more and more stuff. It's about finding that middle ground, to avoid the problems that come with being super rich or super poor.
So, what about those original Hebrew words?
Well, this is where that research by Dr. Howard comes back in. He tracked down every single time those same words for prosper and success are used in the Old Testament. And the results? They're crystal clear. Time and time again, they're talking about succeeding at a specific mission, like Abraham's servant finding a wife for Isaac or Joseph successfully running a household. Not once do they refer to just piling up personal wealth.
So the big takeaway is this. The success God promised Joshua wasn't about getting rich. It was about one thing, and one thing only, successfully completing the mission God gave him. It was mission success, not material success.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what does this story tell us about what real leadership looks like, both for Joshua back then and for us today?
What we see is that Joshua's true mandate completely redefines leadership. For him, courage had nothing to do with being a tough guy on the battlefield. It was about radical obedience to God's law. Success wasn't about how much loot you collected, it was about being faithful to the mission. The entire foundation for victory was spiritual, not military.
And so that kind of leaves us with this final thought to chew on. What if the greatest form of courage isn't something big and flashy on a battlefield for everyone to see? What if instead it's found in the quiet, day in and day out faithfulness to doing what you know is right?